Their little boys cried loudly as their father threw them on the bed and began packing his clothes into a bag. His face was tight with anger, like someone ready to fight the whole world. Mrs. Clara, his wife, said gently, "The babies are crying. They need their father." But James answered in a cold and sharp voice, "They are no longer my concern. I'm leaving you." He continued stuffing his clothes into the bag without looking at her. "Please don't go. I beg of you," Clara begged. "If not for me, then stay for the sake of these innocent children God gave us." James turned to her and snapped, "Marrying you was a mistake, because you are a setback to me, so I'm done with this marriage. Don't come looking for me. As for the babies, do whatever you want with them. I don't care." He paused, twisted his lips bitterly, and added, "To be honest, I don't even care if they live or die." With that, he zipped up his bag and stormed out of the house, slamming the door hard behind him. Everything had once been peaceful between Clara and her husband, but things changed the day James lost his job. Since then, James had been depressed and out of control, always drinking, and he even threatened to leave the marriage because of his incapability to take care of his family. He complained about everything, the small room they live in, the food they had to eat. Clara kept begging him, not just because she loved him, but for the sake of their little sons, David and Daniel, who were just 3 months old. But James never listened. He was hot-headed and stubborn. Mrs. Clara carried the babies in her arms and gently cuddled them. Though they kept crying, she rocked them back and forth until they slowly calmed down. As she looked at their innocent faces, her heart grew heavy, but her voice was firm. "I may not have money to give you the best life," she whispered, "but I promise I will be the best mother in the whole world to you." She kept rocking them softly, and not long after, the twin boys drifted off to sleep, and she puts them to bed. The morning arrived. Mrs. Clara awoke to the sound of her twin boys, David and Daniel, crying for food. There was nothing to give them, no money, no meals, and no time to drown in despair. She had to act. She had to survive. Without a job to rely on, she wrapped the twins on her David at the front, while Daniel was at the back. Strapping the babies to her chest, she made her way to the bustling market in search of any work she could find, but none. She began doing mini-jobs for people, helping people with their load, and hawking on the streets. People noticed. Some stared in silence, some offered looks of sympathy. A few reached into their pockets and pressed out small token into her hand. "For the babies," they said, and moved on. An elderly woman, her face etched with concern, stepped forward and gently stopped her. "You're doing a great job, my dear," he said quietly, her voice warm and sincere. Then she slipped a folded 1,000 naira note into her hand. "This is for the babies." Mrs. Clara lowered her head in gratitude, whispering a soft thank you. Without delay, she went back to work. But kindness wasn't everywhere. A loud, jeering voice cut through the crowd. "Enjoyment, mistress," a man shouted with a sneer. "You were busy enjoying the good stuff and life in bed. Did you think of the responsibility then? Now suffer it alone." His words hit hard. Every syllable echoed in her chest. But Mrs. Clara said nothing. She didn't flinch. She didn't respond. If only the man knew the whole story. What people thought no longer mattered. The only thing that mattered was her 2 little boys. They had to be okay, and she would make sure of it, no matter what. After a long, exhausting day of labor, Mrs. Clara returned home. Her back ached, and her arms felt like lead from carrying heavy loads with her babies strapped to her chest. Yet, beneath the fatigue, there was a quiet joy in her heart. She had earned enough to care for her boys. That evening, she walked to a nearby pharmacy, clutching the small bundle of money she had made. Speaking softly to the pharmacist, she explained her situation, her jobless state, her twin babies, and their growing needs. The pharmacist listened patiently, then gently scribbled down a list. Infant powdered milk, baby-friendly medicine, and a few essentials for newborn care. Mrs. Clara counted the notes carefully and paid. As she walked home with the small bag of supplies in hand, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She was tired, yes, but she was also grateful. Grateful that, for today at least, her boys would be okay, and that is all she cared about. Day after day, Mrs. Clara pushed forward, her twins wrapped tightly to her chest, their tiny breaths rising and falling with hers. She had no one to turn to. Her father was gone, and she had no brothers, no family to share the burden. It was exhausting, yet she never uttered a complaint. Somehow, in the midst of her struggle, she found joy. Joy in knowing her sons were fully fed, warm, and growing. At first, she had doubted herself, overwhelmed by fear and loneliness. But now, she was doing it. She was surviving, and the babies were thriving. Then, one Tuesday morning, as she stepped out with her children tied to her, a voice called out from behind, "Clara!" She turned and saw Papa Michael, her elderly neighbor, walking toward her with kind eyes. "Let me take the babies today," he said gently. "I'll watch them until you return." Mrs. Clara hesitated, clutching the twins a little tighter. Sensing her worry, Papa Michael smiled and added, "I only want to help. The sun is harsh, and they're still so small. Don't worry, I'll take good care of them." After a moment of thought and a silent prayer, she nodded. Slowly, she handed the babies over. Her arms felt light for the first time in weeks, but her heart remained heavy. Even as she walked away, her mind stayed with them. Since their father had abandoned them, she and the boys had become inseparable, tied not just by blood, but by love and survival. She would give her life for them, without hesitation. They were her reason for living, her strength, and her everything. Papa Michael, as everyone called him, was poor but kind-hearted. He took care of the babies with love. He fed them, bathed them, and dressed them. When Mrs. Clara came back in the evening, she found her sons giggling happily in Papa Michael's arms. She smiled with deep thanks and took them home. From that day on, Papa Michael helped her any time she went out with her children tied to her. The twin boys grew up knowing two people, their loving mother and Papa Michael, the man they called Papa. David and Daniel didn't attend the best private schools, but their mother made sure she worked hard to pay their school fees and buy all the books they needed. She also taught them how to be kind, respectful, and hard-working. At 17, the twins completed their journey through the local community secondary school. Mrs. Clara's heart swelled with pride as she watched them step into a new chapter of life. They had worked tirelessly, often staying up late into the night, studying hard for their WAEC and JAM-BAC exams. David achieved an impressive score of 330 in JAM, while Daniel exceeded expectations with a stunning 339. Their dedication paid off. Both gained admission to study pharmacist at the same university. But that moment of joy marked the beginning of an even tougher battle. One sunny afternoon, David and Daniel burst through the door, laughter echoing around them. Their eyes sparkled with excitement as they rushed to their mother, waving their freshly printed JAM result slips. Mrs. Clara took the papers with trembling hands, scanned the scores, and then looked up with a beaming smile. "Oh, my sons, you've made me so proud," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Now I can walk through the city with my shoulders high. My sons, future pharmacists." She straightened her back, puffed out her chest, and marched playfully across the room like a dignified woman of status. The boys roared with laughter. In that moment, the small, worn-out house felt like a palace. Joy filled every corner, and for once, worry stayed outside the door. But later that evening, Mrs. Clara slipped quietly into her room, and the smile she wore all day slowly disappeared. She sat at the edge of her bed, her shoulders heavy with silent sorrow. Not a single naira sat in her purse, not even enough to sponsor one child, let alone two. She was completely out of options. Lowering her head, she whispered to herself, "All these years of struggle, now my sons have made it, and I can't even pay their fees." Her heart sank. Shame and helplessness pressed down on her like a weight. But then, something stirred inside her. She clenched her fists and looked up with fierce determination. "No," she muttered. "I won't let money stop them. I'll do whatever it takes. My sons must become what they are meant to be." The next morning, Mrs. Clara woke long before the sun rose, well before the twins even stirred in their beds. But this time, she didn't reach out for her hawking business. Deep down, she knew that it could no longer meet the size of the challenge ahead. With a heavy heart and determined steps, she walked to the home of a wealthy woman who lived nearby. When she knocked, the rich woman appeared in her pajamas, her face wrinkled with suspicion. "What brings you to my door this early?" she asked sharply. Mrs. Clara fell to her knees without shame. "Please, Ma," she begged, "take me as your house help. I'll do anything. Wash your clothes, sweep your compound, cook your meals. Just help me send my sons to university. I'll work like a slave until they graduate." She explained to the rich woman how David and Daniel were her life, the only joy left in her world. She begged the woman with all her heart. But the rich woman shook her head and said coldly, "Training 2 students in pharmaceutical studies is no child's play. I will not do it." Mrs. Clara stood up quietly and left. She didn't stop there. She went to 6 to 7 more rich houses, one after the other. Each time, she knelt and begged, offering to serve in exchange for her son's education. But they all said no, because the tuition fee is too expensive for the twins. Exhausted and worn down, Mrs. Clara returned home, her body aching and spirit low. For 2 straight days, she came back from work without saying much. Silence hung around her like a heavy cloak. She couldn't find the words. How could she tell her sons that their dreams might slip away? But one evening, she found the courage to face them. She called David and Daniel into her room and sat them down. "My sons," she began, her voice low and trembling. "I'm sorry I failed you. Please forgive me. I once promised, when you were just babies, that I would send you to the ends of the earth to learn. But now, I can't even afford to send you to the university." She turned her face to the wall, fighting the lump in her throat. Her voice cracked, and though she tried to hold back the tears, the pain in her heart was too deep to hide. Daniel stood up and said gently, "Mommy, there's nothing to forgive. We know how much you love us. We know you would have sent us even to the moon if you had the money." David added, "Whether we go to university or not, we love you always." They both wrapped their arms around their mother and hugged her tightly. That night, once Mrs. Clara was sure the twins had fallen asleep, she quietly knelt beside her bed and began to pour out her heart to God. Her voice was low and broken, but the pain behind it was loud. "Father, please help me," she whispered. "I have nothing left, but you have it all. My boys deserve a chance. Please, Lord, make a way. Help me send them to school." Her words turned into sobs. She hit her hands on the cold floor, her shoulders shaking. She cried like a woman with nothing left to give, begging heaven for mercy. In the other room, David and Daniel lay wide awake. They had heard it all. It shattered their hearts. All their lives, their mother had been their strength, strong, calm, always smiling through pain. But tonight, she cried, and it was for them. Tears rolled down their faces as they buried them in their pillows, trying not to make a sound. The next few days were quiet, filled with silent strength. Though their hearts were heavy, David and Daniel made a bold decision. They traveled to the university and deferred their admission. It hurt, but they had a plan. They would find work, save up, and return stronger, with their mother by their side. One day, the twins set out together, determined to find work. After hours of walking and facing many rejections, they finally landed a cleaner job at a company, well-structured and well-kept. David and Daniel started immediately. They welcomed employees at the company's hallway every morning with warm smiles, cleaned the offices with their whole heart. and treated everyone with respect, irrespective of their ranks. People who works in the company quickly noticed their humility and hard work. Employees began to like them, often rewarding them with generous tips for keeping the offices clean. A few women who work in the office, noticing their struggle, tried to lure them with offers, but the twins refused to lose themselves. No amount of poverty could make them sell their dignity for money. They kept aside almost every naira they made. Every night, the boys would gather with their mother, sit on the floor, and carefully count their savings. Then, they would all join hands and pray. Mrs. Clara never missed a single night. She always knelt down, eyes closed, hands lifted high, and cried out to God, "Bless the work of my sons. Multiply it, Lord." Her faith stayed strong even when things were hard. After about 8 months of tireless work, saving, and constant prayer, David and Daniel came up with a bold idea. They opened a small restaurant of their own. It wasn't fancy, but it was tidy, welcoming, and well decorated. They served tasty meals and made every customer feel at home. Their mother helped out the best she could. They also promoted their food online through social media. Very soon, people started coming in large numbers. Word spread quickly, and the little restaurant became well known. David and Daniel were finally on the rise. Still, they kept saving every penny they earned. Though business was booming, their dream of becoming pharmacists remained alive. But fate had other plans for them. One evening, after a long, exhausting day at the restaurant, David was wiping down the tables when something caught his eye. A black, shiny handbag, pretty much expensive, tucked beneath a chair. "Daniel, look at this," he said, lifting it up. Someone must have left it behind. Curiosity won over caution. They carefully opened the handbag and froze in surprise. Inside were important-looking paper, like international passports, and a thick stack of American dollars and Canadian dollars. Daniel's eyes grew wide. "This person must be very wealthy," he whispered. Without hesitation, they closed the handbag and took it straight home. When Mrs. Clara saw it, she listened intently to their story, and then nodded slowly. "You did well to bring it here," she said. "Don't worry, the owner will come looking for this. It's far too valuable to be lost." The next morning, the twins arrived at the restaurant early, carrying the black handbag. As they approached, they noticed a well-dressed woman standing beside a sleek black car, her face full of worry. When they greeted her, she immediately asked, "Have you seen a black handbag by any chance?" David nodded and reached into their bag, carefully handing it over. The woman's eyes lit up with relief as she took it. "Thank you so much," she said, clutching the bag tightly. Without another word, she got into her car and drove away, leaving the boys watching quietly. Daniel blinked and grinned. "She could have at least given us one of those dollars," he joked. David chuckled. "So now you want dollars? Maybe I should start calling you King Dollars." They both laughed and then headed into the restaurant to start the day's work. It was still just the two of them running the place, with their mother helping whenever she could. The business hadn't grown enough to hire more staff yet, but they stayed hopeful. Every day brought them closer to their dreams. Around midday, as the sun blazed down on the bustling streets, the same woman who had taken the handbag earlier returned. She drove up in the same shiny car, but this time she wasn't in a rush. She stopped and smiled at David and Daniel. "I'm Miss Salazar," she introduced herself, stepping out of the car. "For your honesty and faithfulness, I want to reward you." David and Daniel exchanged hopeful looks, thinking this might be the moment they'd get a little extra cash. But to their surprise, Mrs. Elazar didn't give them any money. Instead, she led them to a grand, impressive building downtown. "This is for you," she said warmly. "The passport and documents in that handbag are worth far more than money. You saved me and my family by keeping that bag safe. Now, I want you to have this building for your restaurant. It's yours." David and Daniel stood there, shocked. They couldn't believe it. They had worked so hard, and now it seemed like a dream come true. Grateful tears welled up in their eyes as they thanked her over and over again with hearts full of joy. They quickly took a taxi and made their way to find their mother. They spotted her at the market, standing by her stall, drinking a refreshing bottle of water. Without a word, they ran to her, throwing their arms around her. People in the market stared, amazed at the sight of these two handsome young men embracing the poor woman. Mrs. Clara laughed, shaking her head in disbelief. "Sit," she said with a warm smile. "Let me buy you some water." They sat together, sipping the cool drinks, their excitement barely contained. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "We have a surprise for you, Mummy." "Oh, what is it?" Mrs. Clara asked, curiosity shining in her eyes. She smiled warmly, eager to see what her sons had planned. Words failed them, so they stood up and motioned for her to come along. Mrs. Clara stood up quickly and followed them eagerly. When they arrived at the grand building, Daniel's voice burst with joy. "It's ours, Mummy. The woman who lost her handbag gave it to us. She wants us to open our restaurant here." Tears welled up in Mrs. Clara's eyes. She could hardly believe what she'd just heard. The restaurant, the fresh start, the reward for her son's honesty. It was everything she had hoped for. They all laughed and celebrated together, joy filling the air as they stood before the building that was now theirs. That evening at home, David and Daniel sat down with their mother. They could see the strain in her face, the years of hard work taking its toll. David spoke softly but firmly. "Mum, it's time for you to stop hawking. You're not getting any younger. This kind of hard work is for younger women, not for you," he said, his voice filled with love. Daniel nodded in agreement. "We've got this now. You've given us everything we need to succeed, and now it's time for you to rest. Just only come by at the restaurant to help out. That's all." Mrs. Clara started to speak, ready to object, but the firm look in their eyes stopped her. She was deeply touched by their resolve. They had struggled and fought for this moment, standing strong and independent at last. Though her heart felt heavy letting go, a swell of pride filled her. With quiet acceptance, Mrs. Clara agreed. It was time to leave behind her years of hard work and rest. That day, Miss Eleazar gave them more than just the building. She had filled it with brand new chairs, tables, cookware, and all the essentials needed to run a thriving restaurant. The boys poured their passion into perfecting every detail. David and Daniel's restaurant quickly became a lively hub, filled with a welcoming and elegant ambiance. The dishes were delicious, and their warm, patient, and sincere service played a big part in attracting many happy customers. Before long, customers were pouring in, savoring the tasty meals and the warm, inviting atmosphere. The restaurant became more than just a business. It stood as a beacon of hope, a path out of hardship, and a dream fulfilled through dedication and resilience. Most importantly, the boys made sure their mother was well cared for. She no longer had to toil under the scorching sun. They treated her like royalty, giving her comforts she had only wished for. Her worn, tired hands were finally free from heavy burdens. Instead, she spent her days enjoying the rewards of their hard work, proud that her sacrifices had brought them to this place. But David and Daniel never forgot those who had stood by them. They thought often of Papa Michael, who had cared for them when they were just babies. Though he was old and frequently ill, he had been a steady support in their lives. The brothers made sure his days were comfortable. They repaired his small home, turning it into a warm and cozy place. Every month, they sent money to cover his hospital bills and daily needs, ensuring he wanted for nothing. Their kindness to Papa Michael was as deep as their love for their mother. They understood the importance of gratitude and were determined that those who helped them would never be left behind. One afternoon, David sat by the window of the restaurant, lost in thought as he sketched carbon chains from chemistry, a smile lighting up his face. His twin brother cleaned tables nearby when a woman walked in, unnoticed by David. She spotted what he was drawing and was impressed. "Wow, that's impressive," she said. Startled, David turned to see the speaker. It was Miss Eleazar. Both brothers were surprised and happy to see her. Miss Eleazar admired David's intelligence, and then said something they hadn't expected.
"If you're interested in education, I might be able to help. You both could get scholarships to study abroad in any course you choose." Overjoyed, David and Daniel had almost given up on studies since their restaurant was doing well. After talking with Miss Eleazar, they went home and shared the news with their mother. Mrs. Clara was thrilled. What she couldn't provide, the Lord had now made possible for her sons. A few months later, David had saved enough to sponsor themselves and hire workers to help their mother manage the restaurant in their absence. Thanks to Miss Eleazar, they both got the scholarships. For the first time in their lives, they set foot in a foreign land they had only dreamed about. After registration, they began studying pharmaceutical sciences, determined to make their mother proud. 5 years later, David and Daniel graduated top of their class with impressive results. Returning home, they opened a large pharmaceutical company worth a fortune. Mrs. Clara was proud of how far her sons had come. Meanwhile, the restaurant grew to become one of the most popular in town, and the family now lived comfortably, enjoying the fruits of their hard work and faith. One afternoon, a man walked into the company and searched for a job. He was looking lost and weary.
"What do you want?"
one of the workers asked, his voice laced with curiosity. The man looked up, his eyes filled with hope. "I'm looking for a job." The worker, sensing the desperation in his tone, walked him over to David, who happens to stand by the hallway side, making a phone call. The man pleaded, "I can do anything, sir, even if it is to be a cleaner. I can work, I just need work." Though there was no vacancy, David and Daniel had already employed as many employers they would be needing. But David and Daniel felt a strange pull in their hearts for the man. They couldn't explain it, but they decided to offer him a chance. They gave him the job to as a cleaner. Unbeknownst to them, this man was James, their father. After 2 failed marriages to wealthy women to escape poverty and responsibility, he had been left with nothing. Back at square one, he had used and been used. But this time, it seemed he had nowhere else to go. The next day, Mrs. Clara came to visit her sons. After exchanging pleasantries, she walked by the hallway where she saw James. He hadn't noticed her, so she quietly stepped back, her heart heavy with memories. She found her sons and sat them down in the office, her voice tinged with a quiet seriousness. "Did you employ another janitor?"
"Yes, Mummy,"
David replied. "Do you know him?"
"No."
They both answered, looking puzzled. "But why are you asking about him?" She cleared her throat, her words slow and deliberate. "That man is James, your father." Daniel's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? Our father?" "Yes, he is your father. After he left, I burned every picture of him. The memories were too painful. So you've never seen his face?" The 3 of them stepped quietly into the conference room, where James was mopping the floor. The moment he saw Mrs. Clara, his face went pale, and he stood frozen, unable to find words. Mrs. Clara inhaled deeply, then faced James with a calm yet sorrowful tone. "The men who hired you, they are your sons." James' face went pale, his lips trembling, as he whispered, I am so sorry. I am so sorry, my sons." His voice cracked with quiet sobs as he bowed his head, weighed down by regret. David's eyes darkened, a storm of hurt and anger simmering within. "You have to leave," he said firmly. Without another word, he grabbed a handful of cash from the counter and pressed it into James's hand. "This is more than you've earned. Go away. I don't know you, and you're not my father. Papa Michael is my father, not some stranger." His voice cracked on the last words, but the fire of his anger still blazed strong. Daniel, who had been quietly watching the scene unfold, wrapped his arms around his brother, holding him tightly. "I know you're hurting, David, and so am I," he said softly, his voice filled with compassion. "But please, don't send him away. Not now. He needs our help. David's face contorted with sorrow, tears streaming down uncontrollably. I don't want to help, he whispered, voice breaking. Then, with a trembling finger pointed at James, he cried out, "This man abandoned us. He left us behind while we struggled alone. He left our mother to suffer and almost die." His voice was thick with pain, the truth finally bursting forth from his wounded heart. His sobs filled the silent room, raw and heavy. The tears seemed endless, washing over him. But slowly, as the grief poured out, his breathing steadied. The crushing weight inside him eased, if only for a moment. James, trembling, reached out to them, his voice filled with remorse. "I am sorry, my sons. Please forgive me. I was young, foolish, and selfish. Please forgive me." That evening, Mrs. Clara gathered her sons close, her eyes filled with a gentle sorrow. The talk they shared was painful and honest, each word heavy with emotion. The silence between them spoke volumes as they wrestled with old wounds. Yet, by the time the night grew deep, something shifted. Their anger softened, and with great effort, they found it in their hearts to forgive James, though the forgiveness came with quiet tears and lingering pain. The following morning, David and Daniel made a choice to offer James a fresh start within the restaurant, rather than in the company. They couldn't bear the idea of him continuing to wash dishes. Instead, he was given the role of manager, responsible for overseeing daily operations, a position that demanded both accountability and respect. At first, James embraced his new duties with genuine kindness. The staff accepted him easily, and customers responded warmly to his calm and respectful demeanor. As weeks passed, James's behavior worsened. His temper grew sharper, and the gentle manager everyone once knew vanished. He started berating the staff over trivial matters, his tone harsh and unforgiving. The once lively and welcoming restaurant felt cold and tense. Employees kept their distance, and regular customers sensed the change, slowly stopping their visits. The joyful spirit that had made the place special was fading, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. David and Daniel watched helplessly as their hard-earned success began to crumble. One evening, they confronted James, hoping to reach the man he used to be. Their faces were heavy with worry as they spoke honestly about his conduct. But James responded with bitterness and pride. "I am your father," he snapped sharply. "I gave you life. You don't have the right to question me." David swallowed his hurt and answered steadily. "We need your support, but your anger is tearing us apart." James sneered. "Where is your mother you spoil so much? She just stays home, doing nothing, yet you give her everything. Me? I get only my paycheck." David's eyes burned with fury. "Speak of my mother like that again, and we will have a serious problem," he warned firmly. But James wasn't done. "You don't love me," he shot back, his voice dripping with bitterness. "You're just managing me here." The conversation quickly turned into a heated exchange, with neither side willing to back down. Finally, after the tense meeting, David and Daniel went to their mother, exhausted and frustrated. Mrs. Clara listened quietly before speaking, her voice heavy with experience. "He is still your father, but if you allow him to continue in the restaurant, he'll destroy everything you've worked so hard to build." After much discussion, David and Daniel came to a decision. The next day, they told James that he would no longer work in the restaurant. His reaction was swift and full of anger. "I know it's your stupid mother who poisoned your minds against me," he yelled, his voice shaking with rage. The insult stung, but David and Daniel stood firm. They watched as their father stormed off, his harsh words lingering in the air. Over the years, he hadn't learned anything in life. Still the same man he was 27 years ago. Mrs. Clara, though hurt by everything that had happened, still longed for the days when things had been better. She wanted to forget the past and bring James back into their lives as her husband. But James's behavior had pushed her too far, and she couldn't reconcile the pain he had caused. Meanwhile, the restaurant flourished. With James gone, the atmosphere improved, and business boomed. David and Daniel ran their pharmaceutical company. Now that money was no longer a problem, they had achieved things they never thought possible, experienced life in another country, and now doing great. David, nodding in agreement, smiled warmly. The prayers of their mother has been answered. As time passed, the boys decided to get married as they are up to it. David and Daniel all got married. Papa Michael, who had been a father figure to them all, stood proudly as the chief father of the day, symbolizing the love and unity of their family. It was a day of new beginnings, not just for the boys, but for their mother too. They had their families. Clara always comes by to visit her grandchildren, and children too, even though Clara felt lonely, but her children were always there for her, in every step of the way. For her, and she didn't feel lonely anymore. Dear viewers, what do you think about this story? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and share it with friends. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks, and see you in the next video. Bye.